Good evening and welcome to the September meeting of the Audit and Standards Committee. My name is Councillor Giawan and I'm Chairman of the Audit and Standards Committee. This meeting is being held remotely and being live streamed via YouTube, and the recording of it will be available afterwards on our website. Councillors and officers are reminded to put their mobile phones on silent if they have one near them. Councillors, please mute your microphones when not speaking, as this will reduce feedback and background noise and saves bandwidth to prevent loss of connection. If you are a member of the committee, please leave your camera on. I will first do a roll call to check all the members who are expected to attend are present. So as I say your name, please turn on your microphone and confirm that you are connected. Councillor Barnes.
Present.
Councillor Mary Barnes.
Present.
Myself, Councillor Giawan. Councillor Mrs Kirby Green.
Present.
Councillor Madeley.
Present.
Councillor Norton.
Present.
And Councillor Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Joining us today are Malcolm Johnston, Executive Director, Robin Venard, Assistant Director Resources, Gary Angel, Audit Manager, Darren Wells, Grant Thornton. There are also two technical staff in the meeting to operate the live broadcast and to be on hand if there are any technical difficulties. Thank you, Claire and Chris. Democratic Services Officer and Committee Clerk today is Louise Hollingsworth. Members of the committee will be making the decision today by a named vote. Louise will call out each member in turn and they will be either asked to answer for, against or abstain. Members, please remember to turn on your microphone again at this point. Because of the new format, members are encouraged to make their comments succinct and pertinent to ensure the smooth running of the meeting. Those members who wish to speak, please indicate a question if they wish to come back after receiving a response. So there is no need to type your surname into the chat facility again. It is a requirement that all members will have read the paperwork published on the website. Members are reminded not to press leave meeting if you need to leave the room. Just remember to turn off your camera and microphone. Please be aware that there can be a time delay of around 5 seconds whilst a member appears on screen, and each item will be reintroduced as we get to it. So agenda item 1 is the minutes. So to authorise the chairman to sign the minutes of the meeting of the Audit and Standard Committee held remotely on the 29th of July 2020 as a correct record of the proceedings. Do you all agree?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Louise, are there any apologies for absence, please?
Councillor Harmer.
Thank you very much. Okay, and we'll move on to agenda item number 3, so additional agenda items. Malcolm, are there any additional agenda items, please?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 4. Disclosures of interest. To receive any disclosures by members of personal and disclosable pecuniary interests in matters on the agenda, the nature of any interest and whether the members regard the personal interest as prejudicial under the terms of the Code of Conduct. Members are reminded of the need to repeat their declaration immediately prior to the commencement of the item in question. Do we have any disclosures of interests at all? Okay, lovely. I'll take that as none. Thank you very much. Okay, so in terms of the meeting today, there are no standards reports, so we will move directly on to our audit reports. So agenda item number 5 is the report of the external auditor, the audit progress report and sector update for the year ending 31st of March 2020, pages 1 to 22 on our documents. So if I could invite Darren Wells, please, to introduce.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, members. This is a typical progress report that you would have seen in the past. It serves two purposes. One, to highlight this where we are in the audit, and secondly, to draw to your attention items in the wider sector that we think may be of interest to you. The audit is underway. We started it in earnest in August. We have, given the COVID-19 environment, we have until the end of November in which to complete the audit. And at this point in time, I'm confident we can achieve that. We are working remotely, which does bring some logistical challenges, but working with your finance team, we're working through those. On the wider sector developments, there are just two things that I wanted to make sure you were aware of. One is summarised on page 2 of the report. Page 4 of the report. It's the NAO Code of Audit Practice. So the National Audit Office consulted on a change to the Code of Audit Practice that affects all public sector audits, and that's now completed. The key change is to increase the scope of value for money work that auditors undertake. In the past, we have undertaken work where we felt there was a risk that we would give the wrong value for money conclusion. So we focused work only where we felt there was a potential risk to not understanding either a local authority's arrangements or where the risk was such that we ought to undertake some work to understand the potential severity of that risk. So it was very much focused. Going forward, across 3 new criteria, auditors will be expected to undertake work to allow them to report an evaluation or commentary against the 3 new criteria. So it just broadens the scope of the value for money work going forward, and that takes effect from the audit year 2021. The other aspect I just wanted to highlight to members is summarised on page 5 of the report, and that's the outcome of the Redmond review. This was commissioned by the government to assess the state of audit in local authorities, and Sir Tony Redmond presented his report just recently at the beginning of September, and the bullet points there on page 5 just highlight the main outcomes that he proposes and now rests for government to consider. Some of it would require legislative change, but some of it could be enacted without. That's all I wanted to say, Chairman, but I'm happy to take any questions that members may have.
Great, thank you very much. Do we have any questions? Nothing on the chat so far. No, nothing at the moment. Darren, if I could just ask a question, and thank you for giving us the background in relation to the Redmond review. Would you just be able to explain to the members a little bit more about the proposed simplified set of accounting statements and the benefits that that will bring, please?
Yes, so there's been a strong feeling that local authority accounts have become very complex and not necessarily focusing on those aspects that are of importance to members and to local residents. And I think they have become complex, partly by the need to comply with international financial reporting standards, and that's caused an awful lot of transactions to ensure compliance without ensuring, alongside that, transparency of financial reporting. So Sir Tony Redmond's solution, recognising that the move away from reporting under international financial reporting standards may be a step too far, is that he proposes, alongside the existing financial statements, a separate statement that focuses on key expenditure and key income that the authority incurs and receives, and ties back to the budget setting information that you as members would approve, to try and improve that link between budget setting and actual income and expenditure.
Thank you. I think that's really a really valid point, and having a simplified set, I think, can only be of benefit. Thank you. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you. I was interested in the references to the changes in local government, which I understand, actually, given a recent resignation, have now gone slightly off the immediate agenda. But you obviously felt that that was worth mentioning to us.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. By that, I take it you mean the increased scope of the value for money that the EAO.
No, I wasn't thinking of that. You have a whole page on unitary authorities.
Yes, I think events may well have overtaken us at that point.
I suspect.
Yes, so all we're reporting there. Yes, this is just reporting the outcome of some work that we did with the County Council's network. That just brings to your attention some of the findings there, and it's nothing more than that.
Great, thank you very much. As there are no further questions on this agenda item, if I could please have a proposer and a seconder for this report.
I'm happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby-Green.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Mary Barnes. Lovely. As it's a report for noting, I don't propose to take a roll call. Is everyone in agreement with the report?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Lovely, then that's carried. Thank you. Okay, if we now can move on to pages 23 to 32. So this is our internal audit report to 30th of June 2020. And if I could hand over to Gary Angel, our audit manager, please.
Good evening, everyone. This is my quarterly report to members on the internal audit activity in the first quarter of 2021 rather. The current position regarding the plan in the second quarter this year, and progress made on implementing the outstanding audit recommendations. It's a bit briefer than normal, this report, because in summary, there's no audit reports were issued in the first quarter because of the impact of the COVID pandemic, which I've discussed at previous meetings. Internal audit spent most of its time in the first quarter and accounted for all work instead. Work on the audit plan for the second quarter of 2020-21 is, however, progressing well. This quarter, I've also followed up the progress on the outstanding audit recommendations, and the current position is summarised in the tables on Appendix A, which is your page 26. Perhaps unsurprisingly, there's been a slowdown in the progress in recent months. However, I'm now keen to see movement in the older recommendations, as many of these have not shown much progress for some time. I'm therefore working with the strategic management team to try and resolve this matter. And finally, in the June meeting, members requested a progress update on the audit recommendations made at the property investment audit. This is provided in Appendix B, which is on page 27. The progress to date column in Appendix B shows three things. Firstly, it shows management's initial response to the recommendations. Then it shows the latest update received from the head of acquisitions, transformation and regeneration for the purposes of this report. And finally, the status there is my assessment of the current status of the recommendation. This document shows that as at the 18th of August, 5 out of 8 recommendations had already been implemented, and progress has been made in all but one of the remaining cases. That's what I'm going to say in this report. I'd be happy to take questions now.
Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor John Barnes, please.
Chairman, I think the time has come, looking at paragraph 8 on page 24, I think the time has come for this committee to put our full weight behind the internal auditor. It really is not acceptable that some recommendations have been hanging around for a very long time without being implemented. I'm very happy with the progress on the property review, so I'm not criticising the fact that there are recommendations outstanding there. But I think really the time has come that we must call for all outstanding recommendations to actually be implemented.
Thank you very much. That was something that we discussed at the brief. Gary, would you just provide a quick update on that one for me?
Yes.
Thank you.
I mean, I've got the latest position on all of them here, but I mean, this is something I'm keen to we clear these old ones. I mean, I can accept that the more recent ones would have fallen by the wayside a little bit because of COVID and other priorities, but some of these, you know, some of these 2-3 years old now, and it's not purely due to the latest lockdown and that. So, and you know, I can't see an awful lot of progress on most of them, to be honest. So, and I welcome member support in this one, really.
Thank you. So obviously at the brief, we don't need to go through a list of the actual ones that are that have been hanging around for quite a while, but we kind of looked through them, and I think the key message to members was really that Gary, you're going to take forward some engagement with our senior leaders in terms of moving some of these risk items forward.
Yeah, I mean, we want to either get them resolved, or if we consider that they're low enough risk to management accept the risk of not doing them, because I mean they're all low or medium risk, so there's nothing there that's going to make the wheels come off the cart, so to speak. But it's they could usefully be implemented still, most of them, I feel. So I'm there to be persuaded that there was a reason not to do them.
Thank you very much. If I can just pass over to Malcolm, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to reassure members that I will be asking in time for your next meeting that for a full report on these issues, in which I would expect to see them resolved. I entirely agree with the comments Gary's made. I mean, Gary's covered many of the points, so I won't labour it, but I think it's time that we either took a view that they're resolved, or time has passed on, or whatever. But I think the important bit is we need to make a conscious decision on what we do with the points rather than have them there. So, I welcome members' endorsement of the points that Gary has raised, and by your next meeting, I would expect that we will be able to put a more, I was going to say favourable report, I'm not sure that's the right expression, but a more positive report to the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Thomas.
Chair, Councillor Richard Thomas. Chair, I'd like to endorse the remarks made by Councillor Barnes, by Gary and Malcolm. Very important that these matters are progressed. I'd just like an update on 2 of the property investment ones. Just like to say that when we were dealing with the first item, one of the most significant things I thought there was that the auditors highlighted what they called material valuation uncertainty. In other words, because of COVID, we are going to be going into a situation of increased risk in terms of property investment. And so I think we need to be particularly careful and vigilant around that subject, particularly as there are changes in working practices, which may make a difference to the ability of investments in that field. I'm just asking for 2 updates. The first one is on 311, where there was a sort of a recommendation to reverse the balance between cabinet and non-cabinet members, and just asking for confirmation that that has actually been effected and that change has been made. And the second one is on the following page, page 31, an update on the business of providing a checklist in relation to property acquisitions. Could I just have a confirmation that both of those have been carried out? There is a checklist and it's being used, and also that the composition of the PIP has been changed, please.
Yeah, okay. On 311, I believe that it went to the property investment panel to change the makeup. I don't know if Malcolm can confirm that or deny that. I think that is the case. As for the other one, on the due diligence checklist, I'm afraid I can't tell you any more than is on this report, because that's all I know. It sounded like something was in the offing of being produced, but whether it has actually come up with a checklist yet or not, I don't know, because I've not been shown anything. So I'm afraid, unless anyone else at the meeting knows more than I do, I'm afraid I can't tell you more on that.
Chairman, if I may, sorry to.
Yes, please.
As far as I'm aware, but there was there was an oddity in the way, and that has been resolved. And in the other one, as far as I'm aware, there was a checklist drawn up and will be in use for any future acquisitions. If either of those two turn out to be incorrect, I can assure members they will be made aware.
That would be brilliant. That would be brilliant. Thank you.
By the next meeting, it will have been corrected if it hasn't been by this one.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. And Councillor Madeley, your question's been answered.
Yes, thank you. It was the same question on 311. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, as we have no further questions on the report, if I could please again have a proposer and seconder for this report.
I'm happy to propose, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Madeley.
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor
Happy
Thomas.
to propose.
I think you've already missed the vote on that.
That's the 5 second delay in action. Lovely. Okay, so thank you, Councillor Madeley and Thomas, for proposing and seconding. Everyone in agreement?
Agreed.
Lots of nods. Lovely. Thank you very much. And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so moving swiftly on to agenda item 7. And again, this is Gary Angel to introduce this report. This is our internal audit plan update, pages 33 to 38.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
It's my second report. It's as members will be well aware, in light of the difficulties posed by the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm currently planning the audit work on a quarter-by-quarter basis, as opposed to an annual basis, which I would normally do. The audit plan proposed for the Q3 is shown in Appendix A, and it's on page 36. This quarter will see the start of the annual governance audits, and hopefully a return to a more traditional auditing approach using established work programmes and timed budgets. All progress against this plan and any amendments to it will of course be reported to members at the December meeting, as will the plan for the next quarter. The report also includes an indicative plan for the next 6-month period, which can be found on Appendix B, which is page 37. This period will take us into the first quarter of 2021-22, the next financial year basically, by which stage I hope things will have improved sufficiently to return to an annual audit plan approach, but we'll carry on quarterly for the time being and see how it goes. That's all I've got to say on this then. Any questions?
Okay, so there's no current questions at the moment. We'll just give it a few seconds. Okay, so no further questions from the group on this one. So this report is the internal audit plan for 2021. The recommendation it be resolved to be approved. If I could have a proposer and seconder for this one, please.
I'll propose, if you like.
Can I second?
Councillor Barnes.
Can I second?
Thank you very much. Okay, and if I could now remind members to turn on their microphones at this point for a named vote, and if I could just hand over to Louise.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillors, I'll call your names out alphabetically. Please respond with for, against or abstain. Once your name has been called, switch on your microphone only to vote. If you do not answer after your name has been called twice or contact is lost, members will be recorded as abstaining. Councillor Barnes.
For.
Councillor Mrs Barnes.
For.
Councillor Giawan.
For.
Councillor Mrs Kirby-Green.
For.
Councillor Madeley.
For.
Councillor Norton.
For.
And Councillor Thomas.
For.
That's carried, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you very much. That's carried. Okay, so moving on to agenda item number 8. So this is our Treasury Management update, pages 39 to 46. In Tony Badden's absence, I will hand over to Robin, please.
Thank you, Chairman. This is the quarter ending 30th of June report for members, and it picks up on the Treasury activities for that period. We turn to big page 40, table on page 8, that sets out the current investments that the authority had at that time, some £33.7 million worth of investment, and that's analysed in table on the page on page 40 in the paragraph 8 table there. In terms of our property funds, that's set out in paragraph 9, and I think you'll see there that there's has been referred to earlier tonight, the downturn in the valuations of the property fund is shown in that table from the original investment and the current valuation as at the end of June. Clearly, these are long-term investments, so unless we need to recall that money back from the property funds, then that loss will not be realised in cash terms. And that's what the intention is, that the council will continue to hold those funds and hopefully we'll see the capital values of those funds improve. They are still returning investment to the authority in terms of its interest return, so they are still generating income for the authority in the interim. In terms of our borrowing, that's set out in paragraph 10 and shown in there. In terms of our capitals programme, that's paragraph 13. Some 30 odd £million worth of spend projected for the year, and that's shown in the financing on paragraph 13 how that all might be financed, including the additional borrowing that the council may undertake. In terms of our capital financing requirement, which is effectively under our underlying need to borrow, that looks like around 29 million by the end of the year, which fairly matches the spend for the authority. So I think in terms of I'll move on to our non-treasury investments on page 43 of the report. That's set out in paragraph 20, which shows you some of those assets that were purchased under the property investment strategy, which are still returned to the authority. Some money, around 400,000 income to the authority, so still producing income for us. In terms of the overall budget for income from rental income was 1.9 million. And then of that, 1 million was from existing assets prior to the property investment strategy, and some 900,000 from those purchased through the property investment strategy. So clearly, the current issues with the pandemic and the lockdown we've been through, and the issues that a number of our business tenants are experiencing, we have been deferring rents from those tenants, but we have not at this point in time written off any of our rental income. And discussions are ongoing with those tenants as to their ability to pay and whether we need to write off any of that income. If that is the case, a report will then come forward to Cabinet in terms of that proposal if we do have to write off any of that income. But that's not the position we are at the moment. So overall, I think in terms of the overall economics, as members will be aware, it's a very difficult scenario in terms of our economy, very difficult in terms of our investments. But on the positive side, in some ways, the cost of borrowing is cheap, so it is, you could argue, an opportunity for the authority to use its capital spending powers in order to invest for the future, which is what it is currently doing. I'm happy to answer any questions that members may have on the call one. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for the update. Yeah, I think I'd just like to emphasise the point you made at the beginning regarding the value of the investment. So I think sometimes when you look at investments, it's quite easy to take a bit of a sharp intake of breath when the value goes down. But it's just important to remember that they are long-term investments, and the idea of long-term investments is that they will fluctuate up and down. And the time that you lose is if you draw them out at a time where that value is low. And I suppose I kind of liken it to property value. So if you owned your own property and your property value went down, the last thing on your mind is to sell that property. But unfortunately, with investments, the first thing people think of is, oh, I better take my money out because the value's going down. So I think, again, comforted by the returns that are still coming through from those investments that are significantly higher than anything else that is available readily to us.
Yes.
Thank you very much. Councillor John Barnes, please.
Chairman, you've just made one of the points that I wanted to make. We always knew that there were going to be fluctuations in the property market, and that's why we've very firmly on the Treasury Management, the two funds. We made two decisions, both of them I think very wise. One is we invested in funds that did not have too much stake in the high street. In fact, I believe the CCLA one has virtually no stake in the high street at all. So it's a very sound investment for long term. In fact, I was struck not so much by the fact that our investment had fallen in value, but actually how little it had fallen, given the circumstances in this particular year. It's a pity perhaps that we're not reminded in our Treasury Management report that this is producing substantial returns still, and far better than the returns being produced by our investments in the banks in paragraph 6, which are likely to go down. The returns there may even move into negative territory. So I think actually we have taken a wise decision. My question, and I was reminded really because we have a CFR, in the summer after these events, we have got another very substantial capital investment. I wondered how close we now are to our CFR for the year.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so we are reviewing our overall borrowing limits, our authorised limit, and at the moment, I think for the moment we're fine because it's a timing of when the money is going to be required as to when we start to hit some of those borrowing limits that we set ourselves. But I think as part of the medium-term financial plan review, we will be reviewing the Treasury limits that we set ourselves and then taking account of the impact upon that in terms of the authority's own revenue commitments as well. So that piece of work is ongoing at the moment and will be reported through to Cabinet as part of the medium-term financial plan review, and then the update of the Treasury strategy as part of that. Because as Councillor Barnes has said, we are, on the precipice of investing more amounts of money in investment in property and construction and development, and therefore we do need to revise those. Currently we're fine in terms of those limits that we set ourselves. We are well within those, but it is, I'm looking at the timing of the flow of funds at the moment with Ben in in acquisitions, transformation, and regeneration department in order to make sure the authority stays within its limit, or if we do require to, we extend those limits.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Thomas, please.
Chair, could I just ask Robin? I'm not sure if this is within, your brief for tonight. On the one hand, it is true, of course, as has been said, that this is a very good time to borrow money because borrowing money is cheap and relatively easy. On the other hand, of course, it's a very risky time to borrow money because two of the sectors in which we were most likely to want to invest, namely retail and office, are both going through periods of considerable uncertainty. And so that's my question. My question is, do we have a risk management strategy if we find that office accommodation continues to be something that that sector is turning away from and turning instead towards home working? Because obviously that it looked at the time as if that was going to be a short-term thing, but now it looks as if it could well be a longer-term thing, and very different working practices could become established. If that was the case, how seriously would this impact our investments? And what's our risk management strategy for ensuring that the council can actually survive such a change? That's my question.
So I think as part of the assessments of any investment we make, it is looking at what that market is doing. And clearly, as you've identified, the demand for office accommodation is expected to fall on the basis that more and more home working will take place. So in terms of the new investment that the council will be making, I think that then comes down to the deal that we do with the tenant effectively to make sure that there's a level of security in that deal, that in the event that they no longer require space, but that's then not our problem, like that is their problem and their cost at the end of the day. And as far as I'm aware, that is the approach we're taking, is ensuring that those lease deals stack up in our favour in terms of the arrangements to limit our exposure. The other ways that we've seen through these property fund investments as well is to look to see that there are alternative uses, particularly to office accommodation with relaxation of planning rules and such like, that there are alternative uses to those buildings that we can make in the future and ensure that there's a revenue return or even a capital return if we have to dispose of the site, redevelop the sites, etc. So there are ways in terms of how we look at the investments we're making to ensure that we mitigate as best we can those risks and look for alternative ways of making money out of those sites in the future if, as you say, demand for things changes. We have limited our exposure of our own investments in terms of retail. Definitely we are limiting our investments in that area, or where we have gone into it again is with a secure tenant, in an area where there is, say, substantial demand, for example, the supermarkets, which clearly through COVID we've seen demand for their services has actually been very high, and therefore we make sure that we're not in what I'd say more risky areas, which is probably small units within a retail high street, for example. That's not something that we would likely to be investing in. So yeah, so we are risk managing it, if you like, by assessing those investments that we make. Chair.
Can I just follow that up? Because one of the questions could be asked, this after, in a sense, is our job to ask these difficult questions. To what extent, in connection with the commercial property, is this something which is kind of tied up very precisely, and to what extent is there still some looseness in the possible arrangements whereby we could be burdened with accommodation which might be very difficult to relet? Can I just check, to what extent is that going to be like a hard and fast, very tight arrangement, and to what extent is there still some area of risk within it? That's my question.
I think until the deal is signed at the end of the day, the council is not committing any resources, significant resources to deliver those projects. So, yeah, as I say, it will be tied into that ultimate lease arrangement and contractual arrangements with the tenant. So as long as we know that and we haven't committed the authority to anything, if the tenant or prospective tenant decides to withdraw or change their plans, the council has not committed itself to doing something which it can't recover from that situation. So yes, till the ink is dry on the contracts, if you like, then we have the ability to withdraw.
Thank you very much, Robin. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. This is probably a real layman's question, but in the unlikely event that we do have to start taking money from either our investments or in our capital projects, where would you start and how does the policy go, and to which committee would that decision come first? Just so that we can sort of watch how it would happen. Gosh, I just hope this never happens, but where would we start taking the money from first?
Do you borrow?
And do we borrow, or do what sort of contingency plan has got to be in place before we start having to dip into those huge amounts of reserves?
I think there's probably two things going on there. There's the investment in long-term capital projects and how you fund those, and making sure you have sufficient reserves or money to fund those either through cash or borrowing. And there's also the decision around day-to-day management of our cash position as well. So what we're doing within the Treasury is trying to cover both of those sort of scenarios. What I'm looking for in terms of, particularly in terms of our revised medium-term financial plan, is to understand cash flows over the next 3 to 5 years based upon those plans, and what that means in terms of our borrowing, and making sure that borrowing is in place at the right time in order that we have sufficient cash in order to fund those. In terms of our day-to-day activity, and that's more largely where our money has gone for the property funds, that's more to do with our day-to-day cash reserves that we've used, and we don't think we will need those in the foreseeable. But like with COVID and the call on reserves as a result of funding the losses that we're likely to incur for COVID, we do have to then consider where we take the money from. But clearly, if you looked at the table in the report, we would seek to use cash reserves where they're not making very much money in terms of those deposits. And then the last call would be on those property funds if we needed to do so. So that's kind of our approach would be to that.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor John Barnes, please.
Yes, I think I'd just like to remind Councillor Thomas that the value is usually in the site rather than the buildings on it, which have a much shorter lifespan, obviously, than the site. It's a germane point at the moment because I think clearly both the government and we ourselves are likely to want to invest in housing because that operates on both sides of the account. Currently, we're losing a lot of money on homelessness. And it does seem to me that having sites when we have not been a big owner of land in the past is not necessarily going to be a bad thing if we want to go in for a housing drive. So I'm slightly more optimistic, I think, than Councillor Thomas about the flexible use of our land. We have avoided on the whole commercial. We have gone into some office, but by and large, the way planning is moving, I suspect we can utilise our land and even our buildings in ways which will actually conduce to our housing effort, even if nothing else was working. And of course, the more we bring people back into the centre of towns, the better off our hospitality sector is going to be. So the way things are moving isn't all down.
Great, thank you. Councillor Thomas, did you want to make a comment on that, or are you quite happy? Oh, you're still on mute.
There we go. Well, yes, I mean, what Councillor Barnes says is true in some ways, but on the other hand, the value of land, the reason why land is valuable, has a value over and above its value as agricultural land is because of the profits that can be made by putting buildings on it. So if those buildings become less profitable, the land becomes less profitable. It isn't a straightforward thing of one or the other. And yes, I do take the point that if we do build some commercial properties, which then we cannot let as commercial properties, by converting them into housing, we will be to get some money back. But on the other hand, there is a further expense in terms of carrying out the conversion. So I just think this is just an area where at the moment it's our job as a committee to be very, very watchdog about what happens. That's my point, basically.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have no further questions on this Treasury Management update. As the report is for noting, if I could please have a proposer and seconder for this one.
Happy to propose.
Thank you, Councillor
John
Barnes.
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Norton. Okay, everyone in agreement?
Yes.
Yes.
Lovely.
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, that's carried. Okay, and if we can now move on to our risk management update, pages 47 to 54, and if I can hand over to Malcolm to introduce the report, please.
Chairman, I think Robin is going to introduce this, but thank you.
Okay.
Anyway, no
problem at all. Thank you, Robin.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so we thought it would be sensible to put an update to members in terms of our progress during 2021 and to deal with obviously the impact of COVID. So the report really does focus on the COVID-19 pandemic and how the council has responded. And members will recall that there was a report to Cabinet which outlined the actual physical response by the council, the things it had done, the pressures that it caused and the financial effects. But I think what we tried to do in this report was just pick up some of those sort of learning issues that arose from responding to COVID. And I'll just run through those on page 47. So in terms of sustainably meeting the long-term crisis, I think what's become apparent to me particularly was that business continuity plans and in a number of areas were largely to deal with an incident or a crisis that happened in a very short period of time rather than an ongoing long period of time. So we need to do some work, I think, over the coming months around how we get our business continuity plans around reflecting what we did in order to respond to the COVID pandemic and how it's changed how the council operates and delivers its business. So I think that was quite an interesting look for me in terms of our business continuity, about how it doesn't normally deal with a long-term impact of something like this. So I think there's a little bit of work for the authority to do around that. The one thing I think also that we've seen is the diversion of staff resources and the expectations of government, that local government would pick up a number of areas of work, not only in environmental health and in my area in terms of paying business grants, but lots of other areas, community hubs and things, which fell to local government to deliver. And whilst in our risk management, our policy, our information we have at the moment talks more about where we lose staff to a pandemic, so a flu pandemic or whatever it might be, and the staff are unable to attend work because of illness. Actually, what we have seen is actually our resources, our staff resources in particular, being diverted away from their day job in order to respond to it. So again, just to try and reflect on that and learn through how we manage that process. I think, hopefully members will agree. I think the council has responded really well to the pandemic and has delivered a number of changes and services in a very well way. But it's just important to reflect on the fact that actually we have diverted resources away from the day job, which has meant a number of areas have suffered in terms of their normal business, if you like. Page 48. That's another area of supply chain, for example. Again, it became very apparent, as I imagine most members will be aware, that getting hold of IT equipment became very, very difficult. We managed to secure supplies and then deliver that home working ability for staff. But again, that was a challenge for us. And again, we need to think about how our procurement processes may be set up in the future that enable us to call on suppliers in a better way. Contractor resilience, that was an interesting one. The council itself, it was able to manage and deal with that, but clearly our contractors, in particular BIFA, did suffer at the time and did lose a number of staff to self-isolation, if not necessarily suffering with COVID, but having to self-isolate due to symptoms. And at some points they were less than 80% of the workforce, which then enacted their own business continuity plans in order to ensure minimum services were delivered. The other area which has become apparent, and obviously that has caused the council to have to provide additional funding, is in those services provided by charitable organisations such as Freedom Leisure and the Delaware Pavilion Trust. So again, we need to reflect on that and reflect on that within our risk management processes. ICT, and I think as we mentioned before about supply chains, but also I think the pandemic has shown how important our IT is to us and our ability to deliver services, carry on meetings such as this. And again, we need to reflect, I think, on that as well. A flexible workforce, I hope that we've shown that the council's workforce is very, very flexible, has responded well to this. But again, you need to ensure that sort of philosophy and culture within the organisation is supported, and that officers do feel supported in being able to work in that way. And I think we've been very good at that over this pandemic. Comms is very important, the use of social media, etc. And I think, again, the authority responded well with regular updates for members and for the parishes and towns as well around what things were happening and the council's responses to those. So again, it shows you the importance of communications. Members' role was particularly useful in a number of areas. I know, particularly for me, in terms of business grants. So again, to highlight that members have a key role to play in dealing and responding to crises such as these. One other area, and I think this picks up part of what Gary Angel and his team have been working on, is how robust is our corporate risk register in response to a pandemic. And I think they're in paragraph 3 of the report on page 49. I tried just to pick up that there was a number of lines within our risk management register that actually come together in terms of dealing and responding to a pandemic such as we have. And the structure that we put in place in terms of having an executive director and a number of officers on a team that then dealt with that, I think reflects well on how we put our risk register together, and not necessarily having to have a separate pandemic type risk register. I think it shows that we were fairly robust and we covered a number of those areas of risk that then were actually translated into reality through the pandemic. Mm-hmm. Important bit for the future, obviously, we think things are going to get more difficult into the winter situation, and officers are trying to pull together our responses to that and make sure that our response is as good as it is in the first phase in terms of that COVID pandemic. So hopefully it's just an update for members just to show that I think our risk management processes and structures are sound in dealing with this, and I'm happy to answer any questions that members have, or I'm sure Malcolm is as well. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. A really valuable update there. If I can start off with Councillor John Barnes, please.
Chairman, I'm slightly torn on this one between admiration for what we have done, but a feeling that we do need to overhaul our risk register, and I'll come back to the second point. But clearly, in terms of COVID, we are actually looking at a council that has responded extraordinarily well, I think, and proved itself resilient. And indeed, I think Robin can rightly point to elements in our assessment of risk which were prudent given what happened to us. So I begin really with very genuine praise for everything that has been going on. And I think we to our officers. That said, there are still some risks at the top of the list, which are necessary, where obviously our mitigation still needs development. A lot of them around how we secure our data and how we secure it. But it's always uneasy if something is left on 15 off. And I think we need to be careful that work is ongoing on that. Where I'm less happy with our risk rate, I think in some ways we need to focus on the top end of the list because it goes on fairly endlessly to the bottom. I think we're missing 4 risks, which probably in the medium term we need to focus on. The first, at the moment, I think it has gone back, but I raised with the external auditor. There is a major prospect, I think, at some stage of a drive towards a unitary authority, which would threaten the very existence of this council. And there would be consequences to that. I have to say that I don't think East Sussex is keen on that. The savings would be small, the disruption would be huge. But for us, that is a major risk, and I think we need to start thinking about that risk. There are 2 risks in planning, both of which worry me. The consultation is out at the moment. The more urgent one is around the algorithm, which gives rise to a housing need measurement for this authority of roughly 1,173 houses a year. That is not a deliverable target for us, and it's a major risk if that algorithm is implemented without amendment or without any care for the AONB. There is another risk in the planning white paper that is less imminent, but it is because it's less imminent because it will require legislation. But if that were to go through, I think our planning system would be cast into a great deal of confusion. So I think, again, that is a looming risk, and we need to decide what, if anything, we're going to do about it. The most obvious step is to put in a very powerful evidence on the consultation, and I have yet to see us discuss that. The last of and the one which I think is not, again, imminent. I think we can get through this financial year with a deficit. I think we may be able to produce some kind of balanced budget next year. But it does seem to me in the medium term, we are facing very grave finance, which could actually put us in danger of breaching our statutory duty on service. All of those seem to me risks that need to be surfaced and put in our risk register and addressed.
Thank you very much. Robin, would you like to add any comments to those 4 potential risks flagged?
I think, Chairman, as Councillor Barnes said, there's a number of risks that we need to reflect on and update in the corporate risk register. Some will already be in those service registers that exist, and whether we bring those across into our corporate one. Yes, I think, and ultimately, yes, the financial risk to the authority, perhaps we need to bring that out as a more, in terms of serious financial risk the authority needs to face and deliver those savings and income targets on. So yes, I'm happy to take those away, Chairman.
Lovely, thank you. And Malcolm, are you wishing to interject with that one?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, Robin's covered most of it. I mean, I think the unitary debate, to be quite honest, the speculation does become rather tiresome after a while. I mean, I've been 30 odd years in local government, and it rears its head every so often, disappears again. It may or may not do that in this case. And although I agree entirely with Councillor John Barnes that it's something we need to bear in mind, I think we need to just, put it, accept that it is there, but we need to, if we allow it to, take over, it will be death by paralysis. And I think acknowledge it by all means. And the planning white paper and the algorithm, I mean, it's been put far more eloquently by others who know far more about the planning system than I do. But the suggestion was that the algorithm was drawn up by people who had never actually done a planning application in their life or ever looked at a local plan. Far be it from me to that I'm quoting somebody else, obviously, but I think we do, and through the district council network and through the LGA, there are strong representations going back to government that whatever this algorithm is or isn't, there's something wrong. That is allocating the number of houses in areas like Rother, which when you consider a large proportion is AONB, and then the further 10-11% is actually sites of special scientific interest. Where are we supposed to put these houses? So I agree with Councillor Barnes that particularly the algorithm needs questioning. And as for the planning system, yes, I think you're right. I think the proposals, if they stand, could mean the end of the planning system as we know it. And that is a risk from a number of factors. And we need to, again, make representations. I would suggest that what we're doing at the minute is the right approach, to use people like the Local Government Association, people like the District Council network, because there is strength in numbers in this sort of argument, and I think we need to pursue those. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kirby-Green had a question, but it looks like that's been covered. Thank you very much. And Councillor Thomas, please. Oh, you're on mute.
Hello, Chair. My apologies for that. Can I just say how much I agree with what Councillor John Barnes had to say about the magnificent response of the authority, from the top officers right the way through everybody working through other. The response has absolutely been amazing, particularly against such a dreadful background. And so I think, total congratulations to everybody. I agree too with what he had to say about the planning and what Malcolm had to say on that. But I just wonder whether there is an additional point here, that as Malcolm says, our authority is in a particular position because of the very high percentage of the district where building is virtually impossible or wrong because it's either an AONB or, of course, it's at major risk of flooding. And so you take those two factors together, it's very, very difficult to find suitable building sites. So on those grounds, I would personally urge that in addition to working through the LGA, which I think is a very good way of working, I agree with Malcolm on that, but I think we have a particular case, an individual Rother case, that this algorithm has worked in a particularly insane way, so far as this authority is concerned. There isn't much time left, I think, for putting in a submission, but I would urge the authority to put in its own individual response to the planning inquiry, because we have a particularly strong case which is particular to this authority. So I would very much like to see us do that. I've also got just two other small points. The first one is, well, they're not unimportant maybe. The first one is to say that the risk register, does it include the risk to mental health, which could result to members of the authority working under unusual conditions and unusual levels of pressure? Because I think many members working the authority have pushed themselves to the extreme. So I wonder whether that mental health factor is there in the risk register. I also have a specific question about ID Verde, if that's how you pronounce it, I'm not sure whether it is or not, whose work in relation to the seafront seems to have virtually collapsed, and also in terms of looking after the flower beds in the town. And I noticed that it's far, far worse here than it is in, for example, Helsham. So I'd be interested in additional information on them. And also I notice on line 25, on page 49 in my copy, there's reference to the charitable operators under severe financial pressure that could have caused their failure. And I would like some more detail on that, because that seems very important, given how much the population here relies upon these charitable institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Malcolm, did you want to pick those ones up?
Okay.
I'll try, Chairman, and Robin can no doubt fill in some of the blanks. I mean, can I just go back to where Councillor Barnes started and where Councillor Thomas started? And you know, this has been an incredibly challenging and difficult time. I think we're actually heading into a equally challenging and difficult time, because having been through, on a positive note, I would concur with the comments that both councillors have made, that you know, I am genuinely proud of the way this organisation, its officers and its members have responded to the COVID pandemic. I think there are, of course, lessons to be learned, and it would be arrogant to say that we got everything right. But I think overall we got there in the end with many things, and I think you know, members and officers should be rightly proud of that. Mental health is something that we do cover in terms of our staff, and Councillor Thomas is quite right. And my concern with remote working and all of that is that the mental well-being of staff is an issue, and it's something that we need to deal with. In fact, I mean, I'm very pleased that we've introduced a system of mental health first aiders in the council, akin to, I was going to say normal first aiders. That makes it sound like, you know, in the normal course of first aid, that there are steps being put in place in that. On the other two, if I may, Councillor Thomas, we can come back to you separately on those issues, because I think there are, you know, in terms of the ID Verdi, I'd like to get some more information before I reply to you on that. And in terms of the others, I think the risk remains there, but we just need to be aware of it. So perhaps we could have a conversation outside on that, if that's agreed.
Yeah.
Councillor Thomas.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Malcolm.
Thank you very much. Malcolm, just on that point around the mental health, did I hear previously that we had done, or we were doing a consultation with home working staff around their thoughts and feelings? If so, would that have included an element of, I suppose, the emotion on how you're feeling and how you're finding things?
Well, yes, Chairman, we're just about, I think it shuts within the next day or so. I just completed a staff survey, which you know, we will be discussing with members the results of that survey, along with obviously colleagues in the council and unions. Part of what we want to try and identify, and I would stress, I think this survey, because it's the first we've done for a while, will provide us with a baseline. But what I want to do is make sure that we spot any immediate issues that are going on. And one of the things we're asking people about their views on home working and how we should move forward on that. So at this point, I don't have that information, but within the next few weeks, I'm hoping to have at least high level figures on it.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Mary Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. Just coming back again to this algorithm, which is all very well to leave as part of a general concern about it. But I think we really do need to cover the fact that it is so completely preposterous and can cause us so much danger long term if we leave it alone. And we have a very, very short time, apparently, before we have to have made representations to the government. So I think it's a matter of urgency. I think even from this meeting tonight, we should actually be instructing our, if we have that power, our planning department to urgently make the case for just showing how ridiculous this is. And that Rother has a good case for not getting involved in this ridiculous sum of houses per year. I'm sure, you know, the words will flow, I'm sure, but I think we do need to get on with it.
Chairman, if I may, I don't think it's any state secrets to say that the chairman of planning and portfolio holder would share those concerns. So I think that, but we will make sure that the comments from this committee are raised in that forum. So thank you, Councillor Mrs. Barnes.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Thomas, please.
Hello there. Hello, Chair. I'm just simply to reinforce what Councillor Mary Barnes has said. This would have to be handled as a matter of the utmost urgency, because I believe there are only days before the consultation ends. And so whatever consultations need to take place with elected members or whatever, if they could be hastened, then that would be of the utmost importance. Because as Councillor Mary Barnes has stressed, there is a specific case relating to this authority, which does need to be individually made. So I really want to stress the urgency of acting on that, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Malcolm, is that something that you would be able to perhaps chase up with the planning team?
Absolutely, Chairman. I mean, I think the views of, I believe both councillors are very familiar with the planning system, so I don't think I'm pushing it anything other than an open door to, to make those representations. So I will take those up tomorrow, Chairman, with both the Chairman of Planning and the planning team.
Thank you.
We have only until the morning of the 1st of October.
Yes.
And it really is so pertinent a case. It's not one we can afford to leave to the LGA and any other body, because the general case is strong, but ours is specific and the AOMEs need special treatment.
Thank you, Malcolm. We'll leave that in your capable hands.
Oh, thank you, Chairman.
You're welcome. Councillor Drayson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. The Chairman of the Council just wanted to also support Councillor Mary Barnes and Councillor Thomas, and thank you, Malcolm. Good luck.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, so we have no further questions. Waiting now for the risk management update. Thank you very much for your contribution on that one. It is a report recommendation to be resolved that the report be noted. If I could kindly please have a proposer and seconder for this one.
Proposed, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor Thomas. Everyone in agreement with the discussions?
Agreed.
Lovely.
Agreed.
Thank you very much. That's carried. Okay, and very lastly, just looking at our work programme, page 55 to 56. Any amendments to the work programme from anybody? No?
Can I just say, Chairman, if I may, that the appointment of the audit independent person got a bit held up with the COVID crisis, and we will get on with that, which is under your items for consideration. So we'll be moving on with that now.
That's brilliant. Thank you for the update on that one. I just wanted to bring something to the members' attentions, just in case it's something we want to move forward. Lisa sent an email a couple of weeks ago regarding the local government association doing a model member code of conduct consultation. Did everyone remember receiving that email? And basically, it was really just to ask whether us as a council, do we want to allocate any kind of resource to providing an official response to that, or are we happy for the LGA to do the consultative work and make recommendations off the back of that? That's really just a bit of an open discussion, really, as to what we think.
Given the pressures on officers, I really think we can rely on the LGA. I'd rather do the things that we need to do rather than put further burden on the officers.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas, you agree with that as well? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Okay. So we will leave that off the work programme and we won't add it on. Thank you. Okay, well, that is the end of the agenda. So our meeting is now closed at 7:46. Thank you very much for all your comments and participation. Very much appreciated. And enjoy the rest of your evening.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.